What if the secret to success isn't waiting for the perfect moment, but creating it? Most people get stuck, paralyzed by doubt, hesitation, or endless what-ifs. But what separates those who win from those who don't isn't luck or talent, it's the ability to take action, even when every part of you says no. Imagine unlocking a mindset so powerful that excuses vanish, procrastination dies, and progress becomes unstoppable. In this video, you'll discover how to ignite that unstoppable force within yourself, turning small steps into giant leaps and chaos into clarity, because the moment you stop fighting yourself, everything starts to fall perfectly into place. 1. The calm before the shift. Life in its essence is a sequence of unpredictable events. No matter how well we plan or how thoroughly we prepare, uncertainty is inevitable. This isn't a flaw in the system, it's the nature of existence itself. The world operates on variables we can't always measure. Markets crash, people leave, opportunities vanish, illnesses come without warning. So often, just when we believe we're finally gaining momentum, something shifts. The illusion of control dissolves, and what we're left with is discomfort, doubt, and disorientation. Yet if we study patterns both in nature and in personal transformation, we begin to see a consistent truth despite how chaotic things may appear in the moment. Eventually, with time and perspective, everything begins to fall into place. But here's the catch. It doesn't fall into place by accident. This isn't about some whimsical cosmic coincidence or blind luck. What appears as everything working out is usually the result of alignment. Alignment with your values, with your timing, with your preparation. People who seem calm during storms, who don't break under pressure, aren't lucky. They're aligned. They've accepted that disorder is temporary and that clarity is earned, not granted. Instead of resisting the shift, they embrace it, and in doing so, they avoid being consumed by it. Let's break that down. Every delay or detour you face is often misinterpreted as a failure, but research in psychology, particularly in the domain of cognitive reframing, shows that how we interpret events shapes our mental resilience. The concept of benefit finding, a proven psychological phenomenon, demonstrates that individuals who view challenges as meaningful tend to experience higher life satisfaction and lower rates of depression. That's not optimism for the sake of optimism. That's a trained perspective. When you train your mind to view setbacks as setups, your emotional reaction shifts. You move from panic to patience, from control to trust. In neuroscience, this is supported by how the brain's default mode network, DMN, processes reflection and future planning. When we pause and mentally reframe our experiences, we allow the DMN to activate insight-based thinking. This is why moments of silence and stillness often feel like they offer us clarity. We're literally activating a part of our brain wired to find meaning in chaos. In other words, what feels like intuition is sometimes your brain solving puzzles beneath the surface, aligning fragments into a fuller picture. In highly successful individuals, from top athletes to visionary entrepreneurs, there is a well-documented commonality: emotional regulation under stress. They practice what's known as cognitive flexibility, the ability to pivot mentally when things don't go as planned. Rather than resisting change, they adjust. That adjustment, that flexibility, is what allows the shift to happen without collapse. You stay in the game long enough for the tide to turn in your favor. This is what the phrase, "everything falls into place," really means. It means you held your frame, your discipline, your belief, long enough for circumstances to realign around you. People who seem unshaken aren't without fear or setbacks. They've just accepted that clarity is rarely immediate. They don't expect every chapter to make sense while they're still living it. Instead, they zoom out. They understand that their life isn't meant to unfold in a single straight line. It's a network of pivots, lessons, delays, and leaps. This understanding keeps them composed. It keeps them moving forward even when the path ahead isn't visible. They've internalized the truth. The timeline is never wrong, only your expectations of it are. That sentence holds weight. Let's sit with it. Society teaches us to rush, graduate by 22, have a career by 25, be married by 30, retire by 60. These are artificial benchmarks. Studies in adult developmental psychology, such as those by Erickson and later elaborated by Daniel Levinson, show that adult growth does not follow a linear or uniform timeline. People discover purpose, love, identity, and fulfillment at vastly different stages. The timelines you're holding yourself to are often outdated blueprints passed down without context. When life doesn't align with those templates, you feel like you're behind, when in fact you're just on a path uniquely yours. This is where the real calm comes in. When you stop forcing everything to happen on time, you create space for things to happen in their own time. That doesn't mean you sit idle. You still work, you still train, you still show up. But your energy shifts. You're no longer frantic, you're focused, you're no longer desperate for control. You're disciplined in your trust. That's when alignment happens. That's when the preparation you've done quietly behind the scenes begins to meet opportunity. The idea that everything eventually falls into place isn't meant to excuse inaction. It's meant to guide you through the moments when your actions don't seem to be paying off yet. It's meant to help you see that the universe isn't ignoring your effort, it's timing your breakthrough. The calm before the shift is sacred. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's sacred. It's the silence before momentum, the stillness before elevation, and those who can hold their frame during that silence are the ones who rise the furthest when the shift arrives. So if you find yourself in that place right now, in the unknown, in the delay, in the in-between, remember this: it's not the end, it's redirection, it's alignment in motion. You're not off track, you're being positioned. What seems unclear now will make sense later. What feels stagnant now will unfold with purpose. Stay grounded, stay patient, stay sharp, because once the pieces begin to fall, they fall fast. And if you've held steady through the storm, you won't just survive it, you'll be ready for what comes next. 2. Mastering the art of alignment. Alignment is one of the most misunderstood concepts in modern self-development. It's not passivity. It's not waiting endlessly for the perfect moment. It's not inaction disguised as patience. Alignment is strategy. It's preparation timed with wisdom. It's the process of positioning yourself internally, mentally, emotionally, physically, so that when the right moment arrives, you are ready to meet it without panic, hesitation, or regret. This paragraph distills the essence of that idea. It's about recognizing that success isn't just about forceful effort, but about well-timed execution, about understanding when to move, and just as importantly, when not to. To understand alignment, we first need to understand what happens when we chase everything prematurely. There is a well-documented psychological bias known as temporal discounting, where humans tend to choose smaller, immediate rewards over larger, delayed ones. In a world of instant gratification, most people have been conditioned to believe that faster equals better, but studies like the famous Stanford marshmallow experiment have shown that those who are able to delay gratification often experience significantly better outcomes in areas like academic performance, career success, and emotional regulation. This is the science behind alignment, the ability to pause, to prepare, to wait until the right door opens rather than trying to break down everyone you see. Imagine two equally talented individuals. Both have ambition, work ethic, and drive, but their approach is different. One is reactive, chasing every opportunity, saying yes to everything, afraid to pause. They are constantly in motion, but lack direction. They burn out, not because they lacked potential, but because they exhausted themselves on the wrong paths. The other is deliberate. They understand that not every opportunity is a fit. They study timing. They say no more than they say yes. And when they act, they do so with precision. That's alignment. It's not less work, it's smarter work, and over time it compounds. In the corporate world, we see this clearly with startup culture. Many companies fail not because their idea was bad, but because they entered the market too soon or too late. Market timing, product readiness, customer demand, these are all alignment factors. The same applies to life. Relationships that fail because they started before both people were emotionally ready. Careers that stall because someone chased a title before building the right foundation. It's not that success was impossible, it's that the timing wasn't aligned. One of the most important realizations you can have is this: forcing something before you're ready doesn't make it happen faster, it makes it fall apart faster. That's why alignment matters. It filters out what's not meant for you. Timing isn't a punishment, it's a mechanism that ensures you don't end up in places you're not yet equipped to handle. A promotion too soon can destroy confidence. A relationship too early can ruin your growth. A decision made in desperation can lock you into years of regret. When people say when the student is ready, the teacher appears, they're speaking to alignment. It's not mystical, it's practical. Your readiness attracts opportunities that match your level of preparation. In neuroscience, this is partially explained by reticular activating system RAS function. This part of the brain helps you filter information and focus on what's relevant. When you are aligned, mentally focused, emotionally grounded, and clear in your purpose, you begin to notice and act on opportunities that match your path because your RAS is tuned in. You're no longer overwhelmed by the noise, you're dialed into the signal. This is what the paragraph means when it says timing is not a curse, it's a filter. Most people interpret delays as personal failure. They think, why not me? Why not now? But alignment shifts that thinking to, what is this preparing me for? What am I not yet seeing? That's a powerful mental pivot. It shifts you from frustration to focus, from anxiety to anticipation, and in that mental state you become exponentially more effective, not just in what you do, but in how you see the world. There's also a key behavioral psychology principle at play here called action readiness. When you're aligned, your body and mind are primed for performance. You've rehearsed, you've visualized, you've trained, and when the moment arrives, you act with confidence, not uncertainty. In sports, this is known as flow state or being in the zone. It's not accidental, it's the byproduct of deep preparation aligning with real-time execution. Now think about the phrase, those who win in life don't just work hard, they work in harmony with the timing of their preparation and the reality around them. That sentence is profound because it breaks the myth of hustle culture. Hard work alone is not enough. Countless people burn out chasing a dream that wasn't fully formed or jumping at an opportunity they weren't equipped to sustain. But those who succeed long-term understand the rhythm of life. They pay attention to context. They don't just act, they adapt, they listen, they wait, they study the moment, and when they strike, they do so from a place of mastery, not anxiety. Here's what makes it powerful for your audience. This idea validates the journey. It tells them that being in a season of preparation is not a waste, it's wisdom. That saying no to what doesn't feel aligned isn't fear, it's foresight. That delaying action to ensure readiness isn't procrastination, it's precision. And that the pressure to get ahead often leads people to places they were never meant to be. You don't need to force the door open, you need to be ready when the right one unlocks. So how do you know when you're aligned? You feel clarity. You're not chasing opportunities begin to match your pace. You're not in panic, you're in flow. Your actions are no longer reactive, they're responsive. And even when things don't move fast, they move forward. That's the sign. Life may still test you, there may still be friction, but underneath it you'll feel alignment, you'll feel prepared, and in that preparation you'll find peace. Because suddenly life won't feel like a constant struggle to make things happen. It will feel like a series of moments you're finally ready for. That's the art. Not pushing, not rushing, but preparing so thoroughly, so intentionally, that when the time comes, you don't have to force anything at all. It just fits, it clicks, it flows. And just like that, everything begins to fall into place. 3. The power of patience. Patience in the modern world is often misunderstood as passivity or inaction. We're conditioned to associate success with speed, faster results, immediate gratification, instant progress. But real growth, sustainable transformation, and deep mastery do not operate on those terms. They follow the rhythm of process, not impulse. This paragraph reframes patience not as simply waiting, but as something far more powerful and deliberate: preparation, emotional control, and strategic discipline. That distinction changes everything. When the paragraph says patience is not waiting, it's preparation, it's control, it's highlighting that patience is an active mindset, not a passive state. Research in behavioral psychology backs this up. Studies on self-regulation, such as those conducted by Dr. Walter Mischel, the psychologist behind the original marshmallow experiment, demonstrated that individuals who showed delayed gratification didn't simply suppress their urges. Instead, they actively engaged strategies to distract themselves, visualize the reward, and mentally reframe time. They weren't idle, they were managing their response to time, investing their energy wisely until the reward arrived. That's what real patience looks like. In neuroscience, this shows up as prefrontal cortex activity. This region of the brain is associated with planning, future thinking, and impulse control. People who exhibit higher patience scores tend to have more activity in this region when confronted with delayed outcomes. So biologically, patience is less about inaction and more about intentional focus. It's a kind of mental positioning. You're not doing nothing, you're doing the work of readiness. Now consider the idea that most people give up right before everything begins to fall into place. That's not just a motivational quote, it's a pattern documented across countless case studies. In entrepreneurship, for example, A Harvard Business School report on startup survival revealed that the majority of ventures that eventually succeeded went through long periods of stagnation or near failure before pivoting or breaking through. Many founders have admitted that the closest they ever came to quitting was mere months, sometimes weeks, before their first big breakthrough. What this tells us is that the quiet phases, the periods where nothing seems to be happening, are often the most critical, but only the patient ever find out why. The problem is that we're not trained to handle silence. As humans, we associate lack of visible progress with failure. Cognitive biases like negativity bias and catastrophizing push us to assume the worst when we don't see forward motion. We misread the quiet as stagnation. We think, if nothing is happening, I must be doing something wrong. But that assumption is not only false, it's dangerous. It causes people to abandon goals too soon, pivot prematurely, or sabotage their own trajectory because they're uncomfortable with not seeing instant results. This is where the metaphor in the paragraph, "seeds grow in silence before they break through the soil," becomes more than poetic. It's biologically true. In botany, the germination phase of a seed takes place entirely underground. During this phase, the seed absorbs water, activates enzymes, and begins cell division. This process is invisible to the eye, but without it, there would be no plant. The seed cannot rush this stage. If it's dug up too soon, it dies. Human growth works the same way. Before visible results come, there's internal restructuring, mental rewiring, emotional refinement, skill building, character development. All of it happens quietly. Progress is often hidden before it is seen. The idea that delay is not denial, it's design, is a profound mindset shift. It speaks directly to the way we perceive time and results. In Western culture especially, we're obsessed with deadlines and milestones. But developmental psychology shows that humans do not grow in fixed intervals. We grow in spurts. Think of language acquisition in children. A child may speak very few words for months and then suddenly begin forming sentences. It's not that nothing was happening before, language was forming quietly beneath the surface. The same applies to creative breakthroughs, business success, and personal development. Patience also serves as a form of emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is defined in psychology as the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity, trauma, or significant stress. A critical component of resilience is the ability to delay emotional reaction, to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty without collapsing into fear or impulsiveness. That's patience in action. You're not avoiding difficulty, you're holding your ground while the storm passes. You're not denying emotion, you're mastering it. For your audience, especially those facing long periods of stagnation, the idea that silence isn't failure is incredibly powerful. We live in a culture that equates noise with movement, constant notifications, metrics, analytics, engagement. Every aspect of life is quantified, but what's missing from that system is depth, the kind of growth that doesn't show up in analytics, the quiet internal shifts that eventually change the way you think, the way you act, and the way you show up in the world. Let's apply this practically. Imagine someone working on a business that isn't gaining traction yet, or someone training at the gym without seeing immediate transformation, or someone recovering from trauma who doesn't feel better yet. In all those cases, the temptation is to quit, to change course, to assume that because results aren't visible, effort isn't working. But neuroscience, biology, psychology all confirm the opposite. The effort is working, but its effects haven't surfaced yet. This is the calm before the breakthrough, and only those who understand the power of patience will ever experience what comes next. There is also a spiritual element here, not religious but deeply human. Patience cultivates faith, not blind belief but practiced trust. Trust in your own effort, trust in your timeline, trust that what's meant for you is not being delayed arbitrarily but intentionally. Life's timing is not always designed for comfort, it's designed for alignment. And if the thing you're building, becoming, or reaching for requires a stronger version of you, then the delay is the construction period. So when you're in the quiet season, the season where everything seems still, don't panic, prepare. Don't pull the seed from the soil, let it root, let it strengthen, let it reach for something deeper before it grows toward the light. That stillness is not nothing, it's the design before the delivery. And when the time comes, and it will, you won't just be ready for your moment, you'll be built for it. That's what patience does. It doesn't make you wait, it makes you worthy. That is the power of patience. 4. Redirection is not rejection. Rejection is one of the most difficult emotions we experience as human beings. It triggers some of the oldest survival mechanisms in our brain. When we're told no, whether by a person, a job, a dream, or an outcome we deeply wanted, we instinctively perceive it as a threat to our identity, our value, or our belonging. But this paragraph reframes rejection entirely. It asks us to look at what we label as failure through a different lens, not as a sign that we are unworthy, but as a signal that something else, something better aligned, is trying to make its way into our life. This reframing is not just comforting, it's backed by psychology, neuroscience, and countless real-life examples. Let's begin with a simple but powerful concept: cognitive reappraisal. This is a psychological strategy where individuals change their emotional response to a situation by reinterpreting its meaning. Numerous studies, such as those by psychologist James Gross at Stanford, show that people who actively reframe negative experiences like rejection tend to have better emotional resilience, lower stress, and greater overall life satisfaction. So when this paragraph suggests that rejection is actually redirection, it's offering a scientifically supported way to navigate adversity with more strength and clarity. Think about how often what felt like a loss in the moment later became the very thing that created a breakthrough. A job you didn't get that led you to a better role. A breakup that pushed you into discovering who you really are. A project that failed but taught you a lesson that became the foundation for your success later. This isn't just anecdotal, it's a pattern. In fact, research conducted at the University of Virginia found that people who experienced failure or setback early in life often outperformed their peers in the long run, provided they learned from it. What initially appeared as a disadvantage became a catalyst for resilience and clarity. That's redirection in action. When the paragraph says you can't see the full picture while you're living in the moment, it points to a deeper truth about time and perspective. In cognitive science, there's a concept called the narrative arc of memory. We don't remember events as isolated data points, we remember them as parts of stories. But when you're inside the story, mid-chapter, it rarely makes sense. You don't know the outcome, you don't see the plot twist, you only see the discomfort. It's only in hindsight that the story becomes coherent. And often what looked like rejection was actually the moment your story began to shift towards something more authentic to your purpose. There's also an emotional mechanism at work: ego identity. The ego doesn't just want things to work, it wants things to work the way it planned. So when something doesn't go according to the plan, the ego registers it as rejection, as invalidation, as proof that we're somehow not enough. But if we can detach from that reaction, if we can let go of the illusion that we always know best, we create space to see the deeper intelligence of redirection. In real-world terms, consider how this plays out in relationships. A person you thought was the one leaves. At first it feels like collapse. You grieve not just the person, but the story you built around them. But as time passes, you often discover that the relationship wasn't as aligned as you imagined, that their absence made space for a version of you that was waiting to emerge. And eventually someone enters your life who fits not the person you were, but the person you became after the redirection. Or think about careers. You get rejected from a job you felt certain about. The rejection stings, but that no forces you to reevaluate your path. Maybe it leads you to start something of your own. Maybe it gives you time to develop a skill you would have neglected otherwise. Months or years later, you look back and realize that if that door had opened, you might have ended up in a role that didn't suit your growth or values. That's not failure, that's strategic redirection. The key is understanding that redirection only feels like punishment when we resist it. When we define ourselves solely by external outcomes, every closed door feels like a threat. But when we adopt the mindset that life has more intelligence than we can see in the moment, we begin to relate to rejection not as a block but as a boundary meant to protect us from misalignment. This is where the phrase "every closed door becomes a clue, not a curse" comes alive. Reframing a closed opportunity as a clue invites curiosity. It prompts questions like, what wasn't right about that path? What did I learn from this experience? What am I being redirected toward? These questions shift your mental state from helplessness to insight. That's not spiritual bypassing, it's psychological resilience. Moreover, neuroscience supports the idea that reflection rewires the brain. When we reflect on rejection constructively, we activate parts of the brain associated with growth and learning, the anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal cortex. This is neuroplasticity in motion, Our brain physically rewires itself in response to how we interpret events. Rejection becomes not a wound, but a forge. There's also evidence from long-term success studies. A 2018 paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that scientists who narrowly missed receiving early career grants actually published more impactful work over the next 10 years than those who narrowly received them. The takeaway: early rejection forced them to become more innovative, more resilient, and ultimately more impactful. They weren't rejected, they were redirected into a version of their career that was more powerful than the one they had initially pursued. The same logic applies to anyone pursuing purpose. The no you hear today might be the reason you're available for the yes tomorrow. If every opportunity worked out, if every door opened, you'd have no room to receive the ones that truly matter. Redirection makes space. It trims what's not meant for you. It reroutes your energy towards something more aligned with who you're becoming. And that's the final truth at the core of this paragraph. Alignment is often invisible in the moment. Redirection is alignment doing its work behind the scenes. It's not always gentle. It doesn't always feel good, but it's precise. It removes what doesn't serve your path, even when you don't understand it yet. So the next time a door closes, resist the urge to panic, resist the impulse to label it failure. Instead, pause and ask, what if this isn't rejection? What if this is life clearing the path for something better? The answers won't always be immediate, but if you trust the process, if you hold your frame, one day you'll look back and realize the no was never the end. It was the beginning of everything falling into place. 5. Let go of the timeline. We live in a world governed by clocks, calendars, deadlines, and milestones. From the moment we are born, we're placed on a track lined with expectations, some spoken, most implied. This paragraph challenges one of the most deeply ingrained societal narratives, that life must unfold by a certain age, and that if it doesn't, you've somehow fallen behind. It dismantles the idea that success, love, growth, or purpose must arrive on a schedule defined by others, and in its place, it presents a liberating truth that timing is personal and alignment is what truly matters. From early childhood, most people are handed an invisible script. Finish school by your early 20s, find a stable job right after, get married by your late 20s or early 30s, buy a house, have children, and retire by 65. This script, while common, is not based on individual readiness, emotional maturity, or real-world alignment. It's based on a cultural average, a set of expectations developed largely during the industrial era where standardized progress was necessary for workforce planning and social conformity. But human development doesn't happen in averages, it happens in unique, often unpredictable rhythms. Developmental psychologists like Erickson and Daniel Levinson have shown that growth in adulthood is fluid, not fixed. Erickson's psychosocial stages recognize that major developmental milestones, such as forming identity, building intimacy, or achieving purpose, can occur at different times for different people. Levinson's work on adult development further emphasized that life unfolds in seasons and that late bloomers often experience just as much, if not more, satisfaction and contribution in their later years than those who achieve early success. In other words, the idea that you must succeed early is not supported by psychology, it's a social construct. When the paragraph says you panic when it doesn't happen, it speaks to the emotional toll of comparison and perceived failure. Neuroscience shows that social comparison activates areas of the brain associated with pain, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and anterior insula. That's right, comparing yourself to others actually creates the same brain response as physical pain, and yet we do it constantly, measuring our timelines against someone else's highlight reel. We see someone succeed at 25 and feel late. We see someone marry young and feel unwanted. But comparison is always flawed because it never accounts for context, timing, or alignment. The most successful and fulfilled people rarely followed the timeline. Vera Wang didn't design her first dress until she was 40. Colonel Sanders didn't franchise KFC until 62. Morgan Freeman didn't get his first major movie role until he was 52. Oprah was fired from her first job in television. Steve Carell didn't land his breakout role until 43. These aren't just inspirational stories, they're data points that challenge the myth of the perfect timeline. Their common thread wasn't timing, it was alignment. When preparation met opportunity, they were ready, regardless of their age. That's why the paragraph says time doesn't determine worth, alignment does. It's not about how fast you arrive, it's about who you are when you do. If you rush into success unprepared, you risk losing it just as fast. If you force a relationship before you're healed, it breaks. If you start a business without clarity, it collapses. The goal is not to hit milestones quickly. The goal is to hit them authentically, when you're ready to handle them with wisdom, not desperation. This also brings up the concept of life scripts in sociology. A life script is a set of culturally shared expectations about the sequence and timing of major life events, but life scripts vary drastically by culture, class, and generation. What feels late in one country might be early in another. In Scandinavia, for example, many people don't marry until their mid-30s. In parts of South Asia, arranged marriages still occur in the early 20s. The timelines are arbitrary. What's real is alignment with self. That's where freedom begins. So when the paragraph says, the moment you let go of society's fake timeline is the moment you become free, it's speaking to psychological liberation. In psychological terms, this is called self-authorship, the ability to define your own beliefs, identity, and path, rather than adopting the one handed to you. According to Dr. Robert Kegan's theory of adult development, self-authorship is one of the highest stages of psychological maturity. It's when you stop living according to roles and expectations and start living according to your own truth. And here's the most important part. When you stop comparing your timeline, you actually start living it. The energy that was once used to judge yourself or imitate others gets redirected into forward movement. You take the first step, then the next, and before long you realize you're building a life that's real, not performative. That's what the paragraph means when it says you start walking it, step by step, moment by moment. Success, love, healing, mastery, none of these are linear. They are emergent. They unfold as you do. This also ties into the concept of intrinsic motivation, doing something because it's meaningful to you, not because it fits someone else's timeline. Research shows that intrinsic motivation leads to greater persistence, creativity, and satisfaction. People who follow their own pace often produce more innovative and meaningful work because they are not distracted by the pressure to fit into someone else's calendar. Even in personal development, this matters deeply. Healing doesn't happen on a schedule. Some people confront their trauma at 20, others at 60. The depth of the transformation is not lessened by time, it's often strengthened by it. Emotional maturity has no deadline, and self-discovery has no finish line. For your audience, especially those feeling behind in life, this paragraph is a permission slip. It tells them, you're not late, you're not broken, you're just not done yet. Your timeline isn't flawed, it's yours, and if you keep comparing it to someone else's, you'll miss the very steps that lead to your alignment. So let go. Let go of the imaginary deadlines. Let go of the pressure to be further ahead. Let go of the belief that if it hasn't happened yet, it never will. None of that is true. What's true is this. If you are building with intention, if you are growing with awareness, if you are walking your own path with integrity, then everything that is meant for you is already moving toward you. And when it arrives, it won't feel rushed, it won't feel forced, it won't feel like borrowed success or conditional love. It will feel right, because it came at the right time, not society's time, your time. That is the gift of letting go of the timeline. That is how everything begins to fall into place. 6. Preparation over panic. Over panic. This paragraph delivers one of the most fundamental and yet most overlooked principles of growth. When results stall, don't panic, prepare. In a world obsessed with instant feedback and visible success, silence is uncomfortable. We're conditioned to interpret quiet periods as failure, lack of movement as regression. But the truth is often the opposite. As this paragraph points out, it's during those exact silent seasons when the most important transformations occur, the ones we don't see, the ones that happen beneath the surface. What looks like stillness is often a time of deep restructuring. This isn't motivational fluff, it's grounded in behavioral psychology, neuroscience, high-performance studies, and real-world outcomes. Let's begin with the psychology of panic. When things don't seem to be working, when progress isn't visible, our brain's amygdala, the center responsible for threat detection, gets activated. This can lead to fight or flight responses even if there's no physical danger. We catastrophize, assume the worst, and begin spiraling into unproductive emotional states. Dr. David Rock, author of the SCARF model in neuroscience, notes that uncertainty triggers the same stress response in the brain as physical pain. That's why the absence of visible progress can feel almost unbearable. It registers as a threat to our sense of identity and control. But here's where the shift happens. Instead of reacting with panic, the paragraph invites you to respond with preparation. This is what separates those who evolve from those who stagnate. In performance psychology, this principle is known as mental contrast with implementation intentions. It's the practice of envisioning the future while simultaneously preparing for obstacles. Studies by Dr. Gabrielle Canevin show that individuals who do this are significantly more likely to follow through on goals, not because they're more talented, but because they've rehearsed resilience. They've trained themselves to prepare when others worry. The sentence, "most people spend more energy worrying than working," is not just a critique, it's a data-backed reality. According to the American Institute of Stress, roughly 77% of people experience stress that affects their physical health, and over 70% say it impacts their productivity. Worry burns energy, it depletes cognitive bandwidth. The working memory, the system responsible for holding and processing short-term information, gets overloaded by anxious thoughts. And when that happens, decision-making quality drops, focus fractures, and momentum stalls. In contrast, preparation, real, intentional mental and physical readiness, activates the prefrontal cortex, the center of rational thought, planning, and impulse control. Now think about the phrase, "they are preparing even when the world can't see them," especially then. This speaks to a deep form of internal discipline, not performative effort, not showing up because someone's watching, but grinding in silence, refining skill, building capacity when no one is clapping. Research from Angela Duckworth on the concept of grit supports this. Her studies show that sustained effort toward long-term goals, especially when faced with setbacks, is a better predictor of success than talent or intelligence. And grit doesn't happen in public. It's formed in private during the seasons when external validation is absent. This is echoed in elite sports. Olympic athletes spend years training for moments that last minutes. Most of that preparation is unseen: 4 a.m. training sessions, discipline in diet, relentless repetition. When the moment comes, they don't panic, they don't rise to the occasion, they fall back on their preparation. This is what the paragraph means when it says, "You want everything to fall into place? Then make sure you're in place first." Being in place means having the habits, mindset, skill set, and readiness already built. Because when opportunity finally arrives, when the call comes, the door opens, the person enters, the stage is set, you won't get extra time to scramble. You either step into it or you miss it. Success doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It rewards those who already are. That's not pressure, that's clarity. Let's talk about the concept of the silent season mentioned in the paragraph. This ties beautifully into both agricultural metaphors and biological truth. In agronomy, root development often happens before stem growth is visible. A tree's roots expand to stabilize the future growth above ground. If that root system isn't strong, the tree topples during the first storm. Similarly, people need to strengthen their internal infrastructure, discipline, emotional control, mental clarity, before visible success can be sustained. What happens below determines what will eventually grow above. In human terms, this is your character, your thinking patterns, your daily discipline. Without these roots, any early success becomes unsustainable. This is why many people experience false starts in life. They gain momentum too early without the preparation to hold it. They get the job but lack the skill. They enter the relationship but haven't healed. They build the business but can't manage their energy. What looks like opportunity becomes pressure, and it collapses. That's not failure. It's a sign that the inner work wasn't done, preparation was skipped, panic took its place. What does preparation look like in practice? It's everything that strengthens you before results show up. It's studying when no test is scheduled, practicing your craft before there's an audience, learning how to manage your emotions when no one's challenging you, preparing a portfolio when no one's hiring, building a routine when motivation is low. That's the difference between readiness and reaction. You're not waiting for life to force your hand. You're shaping your hand before the game begins. And here's something powerful. Preparation builds confidence. True confidence doesn't come from affirmations. It comes from evidence. When you know you've done the work, you move differently. You speak with authority. You take risks wisely. You stop second-guessing, because your preparation has created a foundation stronger than fear. Now let's revisit that final line. When opportunity arrives, it doesn't wait for you to be ready. It rewards those who already are. This is a truth echoed by nearly every high achiever across industries. When the call comes, when the stage lights hit, when the investor is interested, when the right person enters, there's no pause button. You don't get to go back and prepare, you only get to perform. And if you've built yourself during the quiet season, you don't just perform, you elevate. You meet the moment fully, not because it's easy, but because you trained for it. This mindset is not about perfectionism, it's about preparation. It's about knowing that your current lack of visible results is not a sign to retreat. It's a signal to go deeper, to sharpen the blade, to refine your process, because the future you want is already on the way. The question is, will you be ready when it gets here? So stop panicking, stop measuring your progress only by what's visible. Go underground, root yourself, build quietly, master your craft, prepare without applause, and when your season comes, and it will, you won't need to scramble, you'll rise naturally, because preparation doesn't shout, it shows, and it never fails to be rewarded. That is the power of preparation over panic. That is how you place yourself in position. That is how everything falls into place. 7. Trusting the chaos. Chaos is one of the most uncomfortable states a human being can experience. It feels disorienting, unsettling. It disrupts the order we think we've built and challenges the illusion that we are in control. But this paragraph delivers a powerful reframing. Chaos isn't random, it's a filter, a mechanism, a restructuring process. It's the universe or life itself, clearing out what's not aligned so that what is aligned can finally emerge. And while that process often feels painful or destructive, it's not punishment, it's preparation. Let's begin with the human response to chaos. Neuroscience shows that our brains are wired for pattern recognition. The moment those patterns break, when routines collapse, plans fall through, or outcomes change, our amygdala activates, interpreting the disruption as a threat. This leads to heightened anxiety, emotional dysregulation, and reactive thinking. But if we reframe what chaos represents, if we recognize that it might be creating space rather than just causing pain, we change the chemical response in the brain. Cognitive reframing, a concept widely studied in psychology, shows that our interpretation of an event can reduce its emotional intensity. In other words, chaos becomes more bearable when we believe it's working for us rather than against us. The paragraph's assertion that chaos is a filter is deeply insightful. In nature and in systems theory, chaos often precedes transformation. In physics, there's the concept of entropy, the tendency for systems to move from order to disorder. But entropy isn't just decay, it's movement toward a new order. In chaos theory, even seemingly random, turbulent systems contain hidden patterns and structures. This has been observed in everything from weather systems to ecosystems to economies. The same applies to human lives. What looks like disorder is often the breakdown of what was no longer sustainable, and only after that collapse can something stronger be built. This is what the paragraph means by things fall apart before they fall into place. It's not poetic, it's structural. If you've ever remodeled a house, you know the first step is demolition. You tear down walls, you gut the rooms. It looks worse before it looks better, but that destruction is strategic. It's making space for new design. The same applies to personal growth. Before you build confidence, insecurity must be challenged. Before you create clarity, confusion must surface. Before you grow, your old identity must often unravel. That unraveling, though painful, is not failure, it's necessary. Consider the psychological model known as post-traumatic growth, PTG. Developed by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, PTG refers to the positive psychological change that can occur after significant life adversity. People who experience major disruptions, loss, trauma, betrayal, often report increased personal strength, greater appreciation for life, and deeper relational connections. Chaos, in this model, is a precursor to reconstruction. The breakdown leads to breakthroughs, not always immediately, not always cleanly, but undeniably. The paragraph also offers a critical question. What is this making space for? That question is a tool, a pivot point. Instead of spiraling, which is a common cognitive behavior during stress, the mind is invited into inquiry, and inquiry grounds us. It shifts us from reactive emotion to reflective awareness. This isn't just philosophical, it's biological. When we ask meaningful questions, the brain's default mode network activates. This network is associated with self-reflection and future planning. By turning toward purpose, even in pain, we literally engage a different system in the brain, one capable of creating meaning out of the mess. The sentence, "the old must collapse for the new to rise," echoes an ancient but still relevant truth found in myth, history, and human development. From ancient mythologies like the phoenix rising from ashes to modern psychological theories of ego death and rebirth, the idea is constant: renewal follows breakdown. In Jungian psychology, Carl Jung speaks of the process of individuation, where a person must confront and dismantle their false identities, the personas built from external expectations, in order to uncover their true self. That dismantling often feels chaotic, but without it, transformation is incomplete. In practical terms, think about people who experience job loss, relationship breakdowns, or life-altering setbacks. At first, the disruption feels senseless. The plan is gone, the timeline is shattered. But if they hold steady, if they ask, "What is this making space for?" new insight emerges. They discover passions that were dormant. They build skills they never thought they'd need. They enter relationships that align with their deeper truth. They change direction, not because they planned to, but because the collapse of the old life revealed a better one. That's not coincidence, that's alignment through chaos. The paragraph encourages us not to fear the breaking. That's a radical mindset in a world obsessed with control. But fear of chaos is often fear of uncertainty. Research from psychology shows that the fear of the unknown is more distressing than fear of known danger. But when we train ourselves to embrace uncertainty, to see chaos as a construction zone rather than a battlefield, we reduce the paralysis that often accompanies fear. We stop fighting the process and begin working with it. And here's where the shift happens. Chaos becomes creative. It becomes fertile. Like soil after fire, it becomes richer. This is more than metaphor. In ecology, wildfires, though destructive, lead to the germination of certain seeds, the clearing of underbrush, and the renewal of ecosystems. Without the fire, the forest stagnates. Without the chaos, nothing new can grow. Your life operates the same way. The breaking makes room for better. So when the paragraph says, "Anchor yourself," it's offering more than comfort. It's a command. Anchor yourself in identity, in values, in perspective. Ground yourself in the belief that this is not the end but the clearing. Because if you collapse with the chaos, you miss the design unfolding within it. But if you steady yourself, if you trust the process, everything begins to shift, slowly, subtly, powerfully. There's a profound clarity that emerges on the other side of chaos. You see why things couldn't stay the way they were. You understand why certain people left, why certain opportunities faded, why certain dreams had to be rewritten. What once looked like destruction now looks like direction. You see the new space that was made, and in that space you start to build again, but this time with alignment. That's the wisdom in this paragraph. Chaos isn't random, it's the precursor to alignment. It shakes the ground not to ruin you, but to rebuild you, stronger, clearer, more rooted. So don't fear the fall, don't resist the mess. Trust that beneath the disorder, something is being ordered, not according to your plan, but according to your growth. That is how chaos becomes creation. That is how the breaking becomes the building. That is how everything begins to fall into place. 8. Move with the flow. There's a reason this paragraph resonates so deeply. It speaks to one of the most vital yet counterintuitive truths about progress, that not all forward motion is forceful, not all success is built through resistance. Sometimes true momentum comes not by pushing harder, but by recognizing when to stop fighting the current and start moving with it. Move with the flow is not just a motivational phrase, it's a life philosophy rooted in psychological flexibility, neurobiology, Eastern philosophy, and even high-performance strategy. This paragraph captures the essence of wisdom that tells us timing, adaptability, and awareness are often more powerful than raw intensity. Let's begin with the opening line. Friction happens when you move against your season. This is a metaphor, but it reflects a psychological and biological truth. Just like nature moves in seasons, growth, rest, death, and rebirth, so do humans. And when we try to force a season we're not in, we encounter resistance. In behavioral psychology, this aligns with the concept of misalignment between internal states and external demands. When your internal energy, emotional bandwidth, or readiness does not match what you're pushing toward, the result is not progress, it's burnout. This friction shows up as fatigue, anxiety, creative blocks, or sudden failure. And yet most people don't interpret this friction as misalignment, they interpret it as a sign to push harder. We live in a productivity-obsessed culture that worships hustle and speed. even when the data shows it's not always the best path. A study from Stanford found that productivity per hour declines sharply when the work week exceeds 50 hours. After 55 hours, the drop-off is dramatic. Why? Because effort without alignment becomes waste. It's not that you're not working hard, it's that you're swimming upstream in a season meant for observation, reflection, or strategic repositioning. That's where the metaphor of the river becomes so powerful. The river doesn't fight its current, it moves with it. In both spiritual and scientific teachings, water has always symbolized adaptability, intelligence, and surrender. In Taoist philosophy, Wu Wei is the principle of non-action or effortless action, not inaction, but action that is in harmony with the flow of life. The Tao Te Ching teaches that water succeeds because it flows around obstacles rather than trying to defeat them. It finds its way through not by force but by awareness. This is reflected in sports psychology too. Elite athletes talk about the concept of flow state, a term popularized by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Flow state is the psychological condition where a person performs at their best with a sense of effortlessness and full immersion. It's not achieved through stress or pressure. It's achieved through challenge that matches skill level in an environment where distractions are minimal and intention is high. In other words, flow is not random. It's cultivated through alignment between readiness and opportunity. And when you're out of sync with that alignment, you experience the opposite: friction, fatigue, failure. The next part of the paragraph deepens this principle. Everything falls into place when you stop swimming against timing. Timing again is central here. In economics and business, timing is often more important than product or strategy. Countless startups with great ideas failed because they entered the market too early or too late. The same holds true in personal growth, relationships, and career decisions. The best outcome isn't always about effort, it's about entering at the right time, and that timing can't always be forced, it must be recognized. The line, "You don't need to rush, you don't need to resist, you need to recognize," offers a powerful psychological tool: recognition over resistance. In cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, one of the most effective interventions for anxiety and stress is recognition of thoughts and feelings without judgment. When you recognize rather than resist what is, you create space for choice. You pivot instead of panic. This is the science behind mindfulness, which research from Harvard and Stanford has repeatedly shown can reduce stress, increase clarity, and improve decision-making. But recognition requires stillness, and stillness feels threatening to those conditioned to equate motion with value. This is why the sentence, "Sometimes the answer is not to go faster but to go deeper," is so important. Depth doesn't mean delay, it means refinement. It means going inward, sharpening your tools, gaining clarity on your next move, rather than defaulting to mindless action. In chess, great players don't move quickly. They calculate multiple steps ahead. In martial arts, power comes from rootedness and timing, not brute strength. The same applies to life. Going deeper makes your next step more powerful, because it's based on understanding, not urgency. Observe where life is leading you, learn to pivot. This is a direct challenge to rigid thinking. The idea that if a path doesn't work, you just need to keep going harder down it is not always wise. It's sometimes self-sabotage. Strategic thinkers, athletes, and creators all know the value of the pivot. Netflix started as a DVD rental company. Slack was originally a failed video game. Instagram began as a check-in app. Their success didn't come from stubbornly sticking to the plan. It came from observing what worked, what didn't, and where the momentum naturally was. That's flow. This also connects with the concept of psychological flexibility, defined by researchers Stephen Hayes and Kelly Wilson as the ability to stay in contact with the present moment and adapt behavior to serve one's goals and values. Psychological flexibility has been shown to predict mental health, success, and even physical well-being. It's not about giving up, it's about adjusting without collapsing. That's what it means to move with the flow, to adapt when the path changes. To let go when something is no longer meant for you, not out of defeat, but out of discernment. Finally, the line, "Life doesn't always go according to your plan, but it always goes according to its purpose," is a profound statement about perspective. Plans are mental constructs. They are built on incomplete data, future assumptions, and ideal scenarios. But purpose, whether you define that spiritually, psychologically, or practically, is often revealed through disruption, not despite it. In other words, your highest alignment is rarely in the plan you wrote, it's in the reality that unfolds. And when you begin to move with flow, not force, clarity follows. This is a neurobiological truth. When we are in states of resistance, cortisol rises, stress narrows our cognitive flexibility, and creativity drops. When we shift into flow, the brain releases dopamine, norepinephrine, and anandamide, neurochemicals that enhance focus, pattern recognition, and innovation. So literally, clarity follows flow, chemically, emotionally, and cognitively. So what does all this mean for you or your audience? It means that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop pushing, step back, listen, feel the current of your life, your season, your energy. Ask, am I in flow or am I in friction? If it's friction, pause, reevaluate, pivot if needed. Because life is not against you, it may simply be redirecting you. Move with the flow, respect the season, trust the timing, and when you do, you'll find that progress isn't always fast, but it is always real. That is how momentum builds. That is how clarity returns. That is how everything falls into place. 9. Stillness is strategy. In a society that praises constant motion, relentless productivity, and visible hustle, the value of stillness is often overlooked or worse, misunderstood. This paragraph turns that entire mindset on its head. It argues that stillness isn't passive, it's powerful. It's not an absence of activity, but a deliberate state of strategic readiness. In a world dominated by overstimulation, the ability to pause, to be silent, to reflect, to wait with intention has become a rare and underappreciated skill. Yet stillness might be the very thing that separates impulsive reaction from intelligent action. It is, in fact, a form of mastery. Let's begin with the idea that silence, stillness, and waiting aren't weaknesses, they're strategies. This is supported by both science and practice. In neuroscience, the default mode network, DMN, is a network of brain regions that activates when the mind is at rest, not engaged in goal-directed tasks. Contrary to what people assume, this network isn't inactive. It's responsible for introspection, memory consolidation, envisioning the future, and constructing the self. So when you enter stillness, your brain isn't idle, it's processing. It's making connections you may not consciously notice. That's why solutions often arrive during showers, walks, or moments of quiet. The mind, free from distraction, begins to arrange thoughts into patterns. That's strategic stillness in action. The world's obsession with hustle culture stems from a misunderstanding of what progress looks like. You're told that if you're not constantly moving, you're falling behind. But this leads to what's known in psychology as cognitive overload. When the brain is overloaded with tasks, input, and decision-making, it loses efficiency. Studies have shown that multitasking and continuous action without breaks result in lower quality output and higher stress levels. According to research from the University of Illinois, even brief breaks during mentally demanding tasks improve performance significantly. Translation: rest isn't weakness, it's recovery, it's recalibration, and it enhances clarity and precision. When everything feels stuck, stop, listen, reflect. This line invites a shift in how we relate to stagnation. Most people panic when progress isn't visible. They assume that if they're not moving, they're losing. But stillness, especially during periods of confusion or uncertainty, isn't about giving up. It's about getting clear. That's where mindfulness and metacognition, thinking about your thinking, come in. Practicing these habits doesn't just calm you emotionally, it sharpens you mentally. You begin to differentiate between noise and signal, between impulse and insight. In that pause, you don't lose momentum, you refocus it. The paragraph's assertion that you don't climb by constantly moving, you climb by moving wisely, aligns with elite decision-making models. In military strategy, one of the most essential skills taught is situational awareness, the ability to understand your environment before acting. In chess, masters spend more time thinking than moving. Every piece advances only after multiple layers of foresight. In sports, especially martial arts, the ability to wait and observe the opponent's rhythm is often more decisive than pure aggression. All these disciplines, though different, teach the same principle. Stillness is not surrender, it's the pause before precision. The line, "Everything doesn't need your constant effort, some things just need your readiness," speaks to another truth: overexertion often backfires. You can't force a flower to bloom by tugging on it. You can't make a storm pass faster by shouting at the sky. Yet this is how many people approach their goals: constant action, zero patience, high expectations, no space for reflection. The result: burnout, discouragement, and distorted judgment. This is known in psychology as action bias, the impulse to do something even when it's better to wait. But successful people, leaders, creators, visionaries, learn how to wait well. They use stillness as a time to sharpen their edge, not dull their drive. Stillness sharpens you, it quiets the noise so you can hear the alignment. This is more than metaphor. Research shows that periods of solitude and silence activate the brain's learning and memory systems. In one study published in Brain Structure and Function, scientists found that silence, even just 2 hours per day, can stimulate the growth of new brain cells in the hippocampus, the area linked to learning and memory. What does this mean practically? It means that stepping back, being still, actually makes you smarter. It enhances your ability to notice connections, hear your intuition, and move with intelligence rather than just emotion. And that leads to one of the most important distinctions in this paragraph. Don't mistake movement for progress. Our culture glorifies motion, but not all motion is movement. You can spin your wheels and go nowhere. You can be endlessly busy and still deeply unproductive. You can be surrounded by noise, activity, and engagement, and still be misaligned with your purpose. Progress isn't just about how fast you move. It's about how aligned your movement is with your goals. That alignment is rarely found in chaos. It's usually discovered in quiet. The final sentence sums it all up. Sometimes, the stillest moments are the ones where everything starts to shift behind the scenes. That's a profound truth seen in nature, systems, and human transformation. Consider the bamboo tree. After it's planted, it doesn't break ground for several years. But beneath the soil, a root system is developing, expanding, stabilizing. When it finally emerges, it can grow over 3 feet in a single day. The stillness was never inactivity, it was preparation for explosive growth. Similarly, many of life's breakthroughs are preceded by stillness. Relationships end, projects stall, dreams seem to pause. But behind the scenes, internally, emotionally, even spiritually, something is building, a deeper foundation, a sharper perspective, a stronger core. And when the shift happens, it's not because you pushed harder, it's because you allowed space for the alignment to reveal itself. So for those listening or watching who feel stuck, lost, or tired, don't rush to react, don't panic into pointless motion, don't let hustle culture convince you that speed equals success. Instead, be still, breathe, observe, sharpen, because in stillness, strategy is born, and when you finally move, it won't be out of fear, it'll be out of clarity. That is why stillness is not just rest, it's readiness. It's not the opposite of work, it's the wisdom behind it. Stillness is not stopping, it's waiting with intent. And when that intent meets the right moment, you don't just make progress, you make impact. That is how everything falls into place. 10. It all makes sense. Eventually, this final paragraph ties together every core principle we've explored so far: alignment, patience, preparation, redirection, timing, flow, and trust. It offers a lens that few people use in the present moment, but almost everyone adopts in hindsight, the lens of perspective. When we're in the middle of uncertainty, things rarely feel clear. They feel messy, fragmented, and unpredictable. But with time, distance, and reflection, those same moments begin to reveal themselves as part of a larger design. This paragraph speaks directly to that universal experience. It affirms that while the future may feel chaotic, the past often shows us it had purpose, and that same pattern continues forward. Let's start with the opening line. Looking forward, things feel uncertain, but looking back, it always makes sense. This is supported by psychological research on narrative identity. According to Dan P. McAdams, a leading scholar in personality psychology, humans are storytelling animals. We don't just live through events, we organize them into meaningful narratives. This is called narrative identity, and it's the internalized story we create about who we are and how we got here. But the key is that stories are made after the fact. In real time, life feels chaotic and non-linear. Only in reflection do we see the connecting threads. That's why we say it all makes sense eventually, because hindsight reveals the structure that foresight can't. The missed opportunities, the detours, the heartbreak, they were pieces of a larger plan. This line taps into something very real, that the events we once labeled as failures often become the defining moments of growth. In behavioral science, this is aligned with the theory of adversarial growth or post-traumatic growth, PTG. Researchers like Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun have shown that individuals who experience adversity often report greater clarity about life priorities, deeper relationships, and increased inner strength. Why? Because what breaks us temporarily often reshapes us permanently. Think about it. The job you didn't get forced you to explore a path that ended up better aligned. The person who left created space for someone who truly saw you. The setback that derailed your plans gave you time to develop a skill, a mindset, or a vision that you didn't even know you needed. None of these moments felt purposeful at the time. They felt painful. But with distance, the pain becomes perspective, the wound becomes wisdom, and the loss becomes leverage for something greater. Everything you've been through prepared you, molded you, brought you here. This isn't just motivational, it's a statement of fact. Studies in developmental psychology show that our personality and resilience are shaped not in ideal conditions, but in complex environments. In other words, it's not comfort that forms character, it's challenge, and not just big dramatic challenges. Even micro-frustrations, delays, rejections, small failures accumulate into lessons that shape how we respond to life. Neuroscience supports this too. The process of learning and adaptation, what scientists call neuroplasticity, is most active when we're dealing with change or adversity. In short, growth isn't an exception in hard times, it's the natural outcome if we remain open to it. And everything ahead of you will align too, not perfectly but purposefully. This is a critical distinction. Life does not become perfect when we trust the process. It becomes intentional. The idea here isn't that every future event will be easy or smooth. The message is that even when life doesn't unfold the way you imagined, it will unfold the way you need. This is alignment, not with fantasy, but with reality, with who you're becoming, with what you're truly built for. When we expect perfection, we suffer. When we seek purpose, we adapt. That's the shift this paragraph calls for. Stop trying to control every detail. This hits at the heart of modern anxiety, control addiction. We're taught to plan everything, calendars, deadlines, goals, expectations. And while structure is useful, over-control leads to emotional rigidity. Psychologists call this intolerance of uncertainty, a tendency to react negatively on an emotional, cognitive, and behavioral level to uncertain situations. High intolerance of uncertainty is linked to anxiety, depression, and burnout. But when we loosen our grip, when we release the need to predict every outcome, we access something far more powerful: flexibility. And with flexibility comes resilience. Now consider the line, trust that the right people, the right opportunities, the right timing, they are all moving toward you just as you are moving toward them. This is not about magical thinking. It's about the reality of preparation and positioning. When you grow mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you begin to attract and align with people, projects, and moments that match your frequency. Your habits change, your decisions evolve, your perspective expands. And as that happens, the external world begins to reflect your internal world. You meet someone not because of luck, but because you're finally ready to hold that kind of connection. You land the opportunity not by chance, but because your preparation met the moment. That's not fate, that's alignment in motion. This aligns with the reticular activating system, RAS, in neuroscience, a part of the brain that filters information based on what you deem important. When your goals and values shift, your RAS begins to prioritize different cues in your environment. You notice opportunities that were always there but previously invisible. That's the brain's version of alignment. It's not that the world changes, it's that you do. The final sentence. Because when you live with alignment, preparation, and patience, everything falls into place, is the distilled wisdom of the entire script. These three pillars are not just virtues, they are strategies. Alignment means you're moving with your purpose, not just your pressure. Preparation means you've done the work even when no one was watching. Patience means you trust the timeline, not force it. And when all three come together, life begins to flow rather than fight you. Not because everything is easy, but because everything is intentional. That's why the title of this piece matters. Everything falls into place is not just a hopeful phrase, it's a pattern, a rhythm, a process that can only be seen fully in hindsight, but must be lived with trust in the present. So for those watching or listening who are in the middle of the unknown, who feel like nothing is happening or everything is falling apart, know this, it's not the end, it's the middle, and one day you'll look back and realize this season was necessary, that this chapter, though difficult, was essential. And you'll say the same words that millions before you have said after seasons of chaos, waiting, and transformation. It all makes sense eventually. Because you didn't just survive, you aligned, you prepared, you trusted. And that's why everything in its own time fell into place.